is like a definition of joy that for me actually just feels very joyous also. But it almost feels quite like a magical way of understanding joy. And it was by a man called Jeffrey Jensen Arnett. He says it's a temporary feeling of elation combined with a sense that there is an ideal fit between ourselves and the world around us at that moment.
That's awesome.
Oh.
JJA has done it again.
Quick! Is anyone here a doctor? Yes, her name is Dr. Emily, and she's a psychologist. Please welcome to the Imperfects, our very own psychologist! Well, here we are again, back in the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. M. It's so good to have you back,
Is that
Em.
what do your clients call you Dr. M?
Some do.
What do they call
I
it?
don't know why they'd call you that. Do they call you Dr. M? Is that
Some people do actually,
okay?
yeah.
Oh, really?
What's the most common thing to call you if we were your client?
Mostly it would be Emily,
Yeah.
I feel, considering that's my name.
What do your friends
It's a
call you?
novel.
M.
Emma?
It's
M.
most people would call me M.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the doc.
Thankfully.
I mean,
Did you-
doc is a cool doc. Hey, doc.
Yeah.
That's
Well, there's
quite
a few
cool.
people in my life that have called me that.
I just
Really?
realised
Yeah,
that Doc
yeah.
M works for your first name and your last name.
Yes.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Ah,
I don't
Yeah.
get that. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Wow, that's true.
Were you
Yeah.
one of those kids who liked their name, or did you wish you had a different name?
I never really thought about my name.
Let us know if the questions are too deep. Wow. Okay. So Dr. M, for those who don't know, I'm sure most people know, but Dr. Emily, very good friend of ours now, and our resident psychologist, appears on the podcast once a month probably, and usually goes back into the archives, well, always goes back into the archives, Em, and you find an episode that you want to expand upon in some way using your clinical knowledge and experience. And then you expand it and you teach us and everyone listening more from a psychological point of view. It's very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be doing that again right now.
Go.
Let the teaching commence. So I really wanted to talk about joy, and
Great.
it's one of my absolute favourites, which makes a lot of sense, obviously, because it's a very pleasant feeling. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about all the guests that you've had on, and the person that came to mind immediately was Gina Chick.
Gina Chick,
Yes.
winner of Alone
Mhm.
Australia.
Mm-hmm.
She was only on last season,
Mhm.
and we recorded the episode down in Tasmania. And she was in the wilderness for 67 days. One of the most joyous people I've ever met, for sure.
Do you remember when during the episode, I think we had to stop for, I think it was something happened with the weather. We had to stop for a second
I
to
think they
read.
call it rain. Something weird happened, like I couldn't see the sun. I couldn't see it anywhere. It was panicking. It was scary. Yes, it was raining and
Water was coming out of the
Water
sky
was
and landing on us.
Everything started getting wet. Yeah. Really.
And then she just leant over and just grabbed some weeds off the ground, she just started grabbing shrubs and started eating them off the ground, like directly below us. And I said, "Oh, could we have that?" She said, "No, I would not recommend you eat that."
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, how come?" She said, "If you don't know what it is, you shouldn't eat it." I said, "But do you know what it is?" She goes, "No, I don't either, but I think my stomach's more used to just eating stuff off the ground."
What a woman.
I know, wasn't it amazing?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so good. I do think the same thing at some buffets. My stomach can take it, but I don't know if yours can. Okay, so
Oh,
Gina
dear.
Chick, the episode
Yes.
with Gina,
Yeah.
and yes, joy. Is there a specific part you wanted to?
There is, but to be honest, I actually went through the episode multiple times looking for the word joy, like as an easy way to kind of introduce this. But she actually didn't mention it, but it was my feeling that was so present in listening to her
Oh, yeah.
that kind of was a bit of the giveaway, I think. So she doesn't actually mention it. I know that she's mentioned it in lots of other circumstances, but it was the feeling that was kind of being elicited for me as the listener. And I was curious about your experience of that too, obviously being present with her at that time. So I've just got a really brief grab, but I think it kind of, like maybe you can hear it.
the shoulds in my head, wherever they come from, whether they be from family or just from experience working in TV and whatever, go like, oh no, rain's here, stop, everyone stop.
Yeah.
We should stop. But of course, everyone just puts an umbrella up and it's fine.
Yeah. And like, how beautiful is it?
Yeah.
Like how beautiful, like the sun's peeking through the clouds now. Like, you know you're alive.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
right now, you know you're alive. You know, you've done how many podcasts, they all blur, and you're never going to forget this one.
No, absolutely.
You're never going to forget this one. And having that's the other thing about discomfort. Discomfort snaps us out of our habit. It snaps us because there's the edge of like, whoa, and I have to pay attention. Again, evolution, in an evolutionary sense, when we're uncomfortable, we're paying attention.
Yeah.
Because you can't be complacent.
Yep.
You can't just like fold, you know, if you're sitting in front of your TV going all Homer Simpson going, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like there could be an earthquake, you know, not an earthquake. There could be a tsunami coming on the horizon and you'd be like, But here, like all of our senses are alive right now. You're actually paying attention to the weather. When was the last time you paid attention to what was coming?
Oh.
And like in a real sense.
I know.
I mean, obviously, because Hugh sort of alluded to it, but we recorded that episode not only in Tasmania, but outside in Tasmania, where there was that strange weather event, Hugh, that you mentioned. But yeah, and with that clip, so what is it about that clip that is...
to be honest, when you listen to it, it doesn't necessarily stand out that this is about joy. In fact, it actually stands out that it's about discomfort. And I think for me, that's actually such an incredibly important point. And that is that the experience of joy, in order to have it, we need to be vulnerable. So it's almost as though discomfort and joy sit in the same basket.
Whoa, I don't quite understand. So do you mean like you have to, like true joy happens when you can kind of overcome the discomfort? Is that what you mean?
Is this because you haven't experienced discomfort before?
What is this discomfort you speak of?
2 new ideas today.
I've read
Rain
about
and
it.
discomfort.
Yeah, it's strange. Is that what you mean?
Well, in some ways, but I think that I think it's Brene Brown that says that in order to experience joy, we have to be vulnerable, and being vulnerable is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So when we experience true joy, there is like a letting go. There's like a leaning in to this moment. In those instances, we let go of the grip of trying to get rid of pain, for example. And this is the thing that stood out to me so significantly with Gina. And it was in the title of the episode, Don't Fight Life. Like she is all in. And all in means I get the full range of the experience of being a human. And part of that is the greater accessibility to feelings of joy.
Yeah.
So that's why they all sit together.
We briefly have spoken in the past about the film Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying how I watched it the other day. And
This is the
Pixar
movie,
animated movie. And Hugh, you've been watching it with your kids recently.
Every day.
Every day? Yeah. And I basically cry through most of it, holding my child, and I think he's very confused about this experience. But it's one of the core lessons of the film is the symbiosis between sadness and joy.
Yeah.
And it's the most beautiful. I'm so excited we're talking about this because it moves me so much.
Yeah, yeah.
He's a well-known philosopher and UK rapper Bugsy Malone says, if you want the pleasure, you must experience the cold rain.
Yeah.
So you do know about rain. Only through the lens of Bugsy Malone.
Oh dear. So I think like maybe even just starting off.
Busted.
If we start off actually having a look at what is joy, and I think one of the first things I want to differentiate it from is happiness. They get used interchangeably all the time. But I think if we look at the research, first of all, there's such an unclear definition of happiness in the research. Like there's so much debate between researchers around how we operationalize and define the construct of happiness. But generally speaking, we can kind of see it as a global assessment of how my life is or how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas we can see joy as a really distinct, temporary feeling of elation, of delight, of pleasantness.
Mm-hmm. So is joy, generally speaking, is it more fleeting?
Yes. Yeah.
Than happiness?
It's temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have these frequent sometimes and oftentimes infrequent moments of being exposed to this delight of living. Really.
Yeah.
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 There's something out of body about joy for me as well. I think like that. I don't. It's like I don't realize it's happened until like near the end of it happening, like a state of flow or something like that, where it's sort of you suddenly realize you're having the best time ever. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder, like, even kind of pausing there, if you guys would be willing to kind of share, even if there's one moment that kind of comes to mind, even very like a micro moment-ish.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel it's like I've had like a really like transformational relationship with joy in the last 5 years, really since I met Hugh, actually, because when the very first time I met Hugh, I've told this story maybe 60 times on the podcast before. But when I met Hugh, he told me how he liked watching my videos on Instagram because it put him in a good mood, and maybe that was a joyous feeling that you were feeling. It put you in a good enough mood to be able to deliver your talk.
Yep.
You know, and just even him telling me that was like gave me a sense of joy, or I don't know if that's necessarily joy, but I think that compliment that Hugh gave to me kind of realigned what I saw as joy. And then from that, I kind of like now on this sort of like mission, I guess, to try and spread joy to other people through like the work that I do, because it felt so much more meaningful. And I think I get the joy when I see other people experiencing the joy.
Oh, that's so spot on. And I'll come back to like there's a core message in there around emotional contagion, and it works at both ends of the spectrum. So I'll come back to that, but that's a really beautiful example, of what that feels like.
For me, the two things that come into mind is being down the front at a really good music festival. But recently it was probably 2 days ago playing basketball with my oldest son, Charlie. I'm the worst basketballer ever, and he's only been playing that was probably the second time he ever tried. And it was so funny how bad we were. And it was like a summer night, like sprinklers were on, basketball and sun going down. And it was perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, after running or after training, like really hard training as well, when it's like so much discomfort and it's awful, and all of a sudden it's just so much joy. I mean, so much so that I now can't train at night time or in the afternoon because then I can't sleep. I'm too happy. I'm too full of joy to sleep.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
I just have to do it in the morning.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think it highlights how much the joyful feeling is really mobilising. Like it actually prompts action, which I'll talk about shortly. But I thought, like, actually hearing all of your examples really, like, I don't know about you guys, but even hearing it elicits this feeling of like a lightness or a warmth, like even
Definitely.
as I'm hearing it.
Everyone listening, you should definitely just think right now about what brings joy to you, rather than just like indulging in our answers. Like have a think for yourself as well now. Like what is it that brings joy?
Absolutely. And I think like towards the end too, I might do a little bit of an exercise that can kind of elicit that in a full body kind of way as well. But I thought it might be useful. There's like a definition of joy that for me actually just feels very joyous also. But it really, it almost feels quite like a magical way of understanding joy. And again, because it's an emotion, lots of people have tried to describe it and operationalize it. This is just one of the ways in which it has been. And it was by a man called Jeffrey Jensen Arnett quite recently. I think it was in 2019. And I'll explain it how he says, and then I'll tell you a little bit more in terms of how I interpret that. But he says it's a temporary feeling of elation combined with a sense that there is an ideal fit between ourselves and the world around us at that moment.
That's awesome.
Oh,
JJA has done it again.
wow.
So it's what he says, it's like the right relation. It's the perfect fit for me in this moment. And this means that everything is right with the world.
It's, I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking about this. It's like, remember Guitar Hero? Remember the game?
Yeah.
You know, when you get on a roll and you're hitting them all at the right time. You're like, oh my God. It's like, this is incredible. How is this happening?
Everything is right in the world.
That's pure joy from discomfort. So
It definitely explains why it's like, well, I find it really hard to sleep because I'm like laying there going, oh God, I've done it again. I'm too happy. I can't sleep. This is so annoying. It's also journaling as well. I've had to stop journaling before bed because that makes me too happy to sleep as well. I have to stop doing that as well.
wow. So what do you do?
What do you
just
do?
like painful things?
Depressed. Just read sad stories.
Oh dear.
Yeah, no, but that makes so much sense where it feels like the universe is aligned for you
Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And if we think about the opposite of that, that's despair, where it feels like nothing fits.
Mhm.
And so I think like that for me provides such a great context for understanding our experiences. You know, despair at one end and joy and hopefulness at the other end. But we can work with the whole thing. Like I said before, we get exposed to joyfulness when we've also been exposed to grief and sorrow.
It feels kind of sad that these moments of joy are so fleeting, and the feeling that the universe is aligning for you. It's sort of sad that doesn't happen very much for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess then that's what makes those moments so joyous, because they're special.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, that is true. But I also think that they are potentially happening much more often than we realise.
Great.
Yeah.
That's good
But we
news.
just don't pay attention to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Even like if you're as a listener, notice even the title of this and you're like, I don't have time for that. Or this is too hard for me. I've got too much stuff here. Like this is not an emotion that I can access right now.
In which case, it's almost annoying even saying the word.
Yes. Yeah. And so even like hearing other people, like even hearing us potentially laughing might feel like this is too, like I can't do this. This is too much.
Yeah.
And this is one of the really big barriers to feelings of joy are messages like, I just don't have time. I've got too much stuff I've got to do. I don't have time to pay attention to joy. It feels like a first world problem.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I feel despair, I don't want it. I don't want joy. It's like, don't try and make me feel better. I want to sit in this.
I want more despair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, which is really interesting as it highlights another aspect to this. And this is sometimes the underbelly of joy. And that is that when we get exposed to the possibility of it, it also might feel really aversive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example, of that. It has its origins in early childhood, that for some people exposure to pleasant emotions are actually really are met with criticism, judgment, punishment. So for example, particularly if there was a trauma background, silliness, playfulness, laughing was criticised or punished, that sets you up to say, the experience of joyfulness is actually really uncomfortable for me because my learning history says it was associated with it being wrong or punishable.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or equally like kind of big emotions, like big joyful outbursts might have been like, oh no, that's too much. Your emotions are too big.
Is that kind of like when I can't think of an exact example, but I can see the scene in my head where someone is being really silly and funny, and not in a way that's necessarily that disruptive. It's like a funny thing that's happening and some people are laughing, but then someone, usually an older person, will be like, oh, just don't be silly. Like literally.
Yeah.
Don't be silly, stop being ridiculous, calm down. Is that the same sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a similar experience in there. Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is also particularly the case for people that have neurodiversity. I can know certainly that people that I've seen in my office have like stories, for example, of being told that they are too much, that their emotions are too much, that I'm too big. And I think that I really want to kind of pay attention to the impact that has in terms of like a permission to feel joyfulness. Yeah.
And just a permission to be yourself.
Totally. Yeah. To experience this full range of emotion rather than having to dampen it down, or what's so common is to have to apologize for it. think that's a very common experience.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So for some people, actually tapping into joy feels like contradictorily feels actually unpleasant. Like it feels like it's a dangerous emotion.
I haven't considered that or thought about that or thought that would be a thing for anyone at all. For me, when you were talking about why joy may not be the first thing people want to click onto, is because there's just no joy in their life right now, and they would love to have joy, but because there's a situation they're going through, it's not accessible.
Yep.
That's what I thought would have been the main issue with that, as opposed to someone going, "No, I've had a bad experience with it before." To me, that sounds weird that someone would have a bad experience with joy.
Yeah. I think like, to be really honest, I think I'm probably talking about the more maladaptive end of the spectrum of early parenting experiences, early childhood experiences, where there's like significant trauma.
Okay.
So that's not going to be everyone's experience. That getting exposed to pleasant feelings actually is dangerous. Probably the more common one is I've got too much shit going on. I don't have space for joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something that's really integral about the function of joy, and that is that it's hugely protective and hugely resourcing for us in the space of crisis, of distress, of overwhelm. And I'll explain why. Physiologically, if we look at the state of joy, we are sitting in a state of the nervous system which is about connection and bonding. So when we experience joy, we get releases of hormones and chemicals like endorphins, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, endocannabinoids, which I actually just really like the sound of that word.
Yeah.
Right. What is an endocannabinoid? What is it? Endocannabinoid.
Endocannabinoid.
Oh, that's even better. Endocannabinoid. Wow.
And they're in essence, they're really helping us to manage the stress response. And in fact, some of the research suggests that a runner's high is a function more of endocannabinoids than it is of endorphins.
I thought it was endocannabinoids.
Yeah.
Cannabinoids.
Yeah, cannabinoids.
But I'll let you do your own research on that. But in essence, like when we get exposed to this feeling changes our physiological state, which then becomes really buffering for our stress response. It's giving us resources to cope with stress in an ongoing way.
Is that why a really inappropriate joke or like something very funny at a very stressful, or it just feels so good?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yes.
exactly it. It's like the school assembly sort of situation where you're supposed to
or
be.
you're all in trouble and someone does something that's
Or the classic at church or whatever, where you're supposed to be behaving
Yeah.
and then you can't stop laughing.
So the state of joyfulness physiologically is not only stress buffering, but it is promoting and prompting connection and social bonding. And obviously we know that the more we're doing that, the more that we're connecting with others, the better that is for our general health and well-being anyway. And it also highlights this experience here of emotional contagion. So when I witness you being joyful, it elicits for me like a response of joyfulness. And a really great example of this would be like seeing a friend or a child opening a present you've given them.
Yeah.
And you see the joy on their face. And if you're really present and tuned in, what's the feeling that's here for you too? And it becomes like this really almost like reinforcing experience. I witness other people's joy that trips me into feeling joyful. We're both then kind of like building on that experience.
Does it make a difference? Does it make you more joyful if the person you're seeing experiencing joy is someone close to you?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So this makes me think of something which I read about last year, which I love so much, is Freud and Freud. So like the opposite of, what's it the opposite of again?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude, yeah. So
It's also the legal firm that Sigmund Freud set up with his dad, but didn't go very well. But yeah.
It was a complex relationship.
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah, he really wanted to do it with his mum. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Freud and Freud.
Freud and Freud.
extremely good. That has to say.
So Freudenfreud is the idea that you experience joy from someone else's joy. And I can't help but think about my daughter Elsie, who at Christmas time would excitedly watch someone else open their present with the same vigor and enthusiasm she had for her own present. And then she would watch them open it and then watch their face. And she would say, back then she called Benji Bay, and she'd say, Bay, I'm so happy for you. And that she was genuinely, watching him get a present was just as exciting for her. It was like this superpower. So in very real time, you're watching it at Christmas, like the power of Freudenfreud, not the legal firm. The power of Freudenfreud is like she gets the joy from opening her own present. Then she turns around and watches her brother get a present, and she gets that joy as well of watching him.
And then what also happened to you witnessing her joy?
Oh, I was Freuden. I was just like, it was unbelievable. It was contagious. It was that joy that she spread by enjoying and getting joy from someone else's joy.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's another researcher who suggests that one of the core features of joy is an experience of reunion.
That's it. I mean, the other thing that's coming to mind is the joy in watching movie bloopers. Like, watching actors laugh when they're not supposed to.
Yes.
Like there's
It's
a
really
great
good.
Seinfeld, Seinfeld bloopers and The Office bloopers are just one of the most joyous things you can watch. And maybe that's why. Yeah.
I have to say that like last year when I was going through a bit of a difficult time with some various things, I actually in the evenings would watch the bloopers of Afterlife.
Oh,
with Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting because that show also is about grief, but there's so much joyfulness in that show.
Yeah.
So again, really highlighting that the thing about joy is that it can be held in the same context as unpleasant emotions as well. So we can experience these moments of joyfulness amongst the grief, for example.
And they don't necessarily feel inappropriate. They can feel really healing, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned reunion before the joy get there. So I think I spoke about this on the podcast, but last year I went to a funeral of a guy who was my age at school and really tragic circumstances. But I noticed myself having moments of joy throughout it because I was seeing people I hadn't seen in 20 years. And it was people that I loved when I was at school. And I remember being in the car thinking, I feel really weird here. Like I've just been through one of the saddest things in my life, but I'm feeling joy right now. And I didn't know how to reconcile that at all. In fact, I didn't even say it out loud because I felt like what a strange thing to be feeling right now. But I saw so many people that I loved 20 years ago and haven't seen since, and talking to them about the person, how great they were, just brought a lot of joy.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing example. It's also an interesting example too of the fact that there's a discomfort with there being an and, as in I can feel sorrow, grief, sadness, and I can experience joyfulness at the same time or in the relative proximity. Whereas what can often happen, particularly in the space of grief, is that it feels almost like a betrayal.
Yeah.
To be leaning into, acknowledging, noticing feelings of joyfulness. That in some ways it's a betrayal of my relationship with that person, or it's a betrayal of the memory, which, like, even as I say that, feels heartbreaking.
It is, and it's the experiences I've had with that. It's almost like I want permission from someone else to be able to be joyous, and then as soon as one person like shows a bit of joy or laughs at something that's funny, or it's like everyone is like given permission because everyone's probably thinking it. If something funny happens at the funeral, or if you're experiencing grief and something funny happens, it's like, the feeling is I don't want to betray the person or the memory, but then it just takes one person, for me at least, takes one person to kind of say something funny or do something funny, and it's like, oh yeah, it's okay to be joyous. It doesn't actually mean anything negative about how I feel about the person.
Yeah, exactly. There's an interesting quote by an American author and activist who talks about the importance, the pivotal importance of joyfulness in the space of great challenge, struggle, and difficulty. And she says, I will never apologize for embracing joy and beauty, even when the world is falling apart, because joy and beauty are fuel for my activism.
Brilliant.
And it feels to me like that's particularly relevant, like in the world that we're in at the moment, when there's so much trauma, global trauma, and so much suffering, that it would almost feel like it's not appropriate for me to be expressing or experiencing joy.
It's really it highlights the importance of like satirists or like the Batuta Advocate, for example, like people like, or the Onion in the States, or like Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, like all those people who they'll tackle sometimes really serious, heartbreaking things. And I know over the years, like the Onion particularly, which is essentially the American version of the Batuta Advocate, and something really, really horrific will happen, like 9/11 or something. And on the odd occasion, the Onion will release a headline, which seems like, my initial reaction is like, too soon? Like, really? Already are we? But I think it's quite important though, because it's got to be done with such a deft touch. And it's like, you definitely can get it wrong, and it can be completely inappropriate and wrong. But when it's done in the right way, it's so powerful. And for me, at least, in my ability to process traumatic things, really sad things, it does help me process it, because it gives it an element of like, I don't know, like humanism to it or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look at the function of joy in the midst of trauma and suffering, joy is, like I said before, joy is a mobilising emotion. So it prompts us actually to take action. It actually prompts us to move. And when we think about the experience of depression, when we think about the experience of great sadness or hopelessness, that's usually accompanied by an immobilising. And it's in that space that we actually can't do very much. So again, joy is actually really a necessary condition to help us move through the suffering. Does that make sense? It's actually literally moving us.
Yeah.
So why is it so hard then for, like, if I'm in the depths of despair and I know intellectually that I should put on a ridiculous song and dance, and I know that will probably shift my mood, but it's the last thing that I really want to do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think that is so normal and so natural. And it's a real challenge to shift, particularly when we're feeling very low. It will feel actually probably too overwhelming. And in the depths and intensity, particularly of grief, it would almost feel laughable for me to suggest, even as your therapist, just turn on some music.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. And if we look at it, if we went even from the really severe end or the end of great intensity, we actually would probably more likely want to start with some very gentle movement of the body. So it might be something like gentle stretching or me walking around the block. So at least the body is actually starting to mobilise, and it's then from those states we can then start to do more of the bigger things.
That sounds like a much more extreme end of the spectrum of something that was sort of running in my head for a while when we're talking about this, in that it feels like it's impossible to strive for joy. And the more you strive for it, the more elusive it is. I wonder what the role of focus and presence is in joy.
It's fundamental. Yeah, it is. And the thing I will mention here is that joy and gratitude feed off each other. So they are distinct, but they are so intimately intertwined in some ways. And so it's almost like when we have moments of joyfulness, if we're present to it, that also then moves us into feelings of gratitude And equally, if we have moments of feeling a gratitude, we're more inclined to notice feelings of joyfulness. So they're kind of almost like they wrap around each other. But yes, fundamentally, if we want more joy, we need to be more present. And Barbara Fredrickson, who you know very well, speaks of the idea of like these micro moments of positive resonance. And this is kind of what we're looking at, is how do I bring more attention to these small moments and actually name it?
Because we're surrounded by them every day.
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you've got little kids, this is like, to be honest, this is a really easy thing. Like you can see these moments all the time. Equally, if you have a pet, let me tell you, if you arrive home to a dog, like how much joyfulness is in that reunion?
Depends what he's just eaten. Headphones or your shoes or, but yeah.
Well, at least joyfulness from them.
Yes.
Like, you know, it's unadulterated and so there's so much like liberation in those full moments of joyfulness, but we have to show up to them.
Yeah.
So it requires us to slow down long enough to go, oh, aha, here it is. Like here is this moment right now. And even something as simple as like calling it out loud, like I'm in joy, like I'm noticing I'm in joy. Even the utilization of language to almost like solidify that it's here is really, really helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I find that I sometimes fall into the trap of doing, and I know people who do this, but try and repeat joy, repeat that what's happened and expect the same result. So to use the example I had before of the basketball thing, I think it must have been, let's say, a Monday or Tuesday that we were doing it, and it was pure joy. And then we did it again a couple of days later, and I found myself not as present and then trying to recapture that joy and forcing it. And it was still good. It was still a fun thing to do, but it didn't have that same patina of like lost in it. And I feel like when I used to go to music festivals, and it was one of my favourite things to do, I feel like the first Falls Festival I went to was one of the most joyous things I've ever done. And they got less joyful each time because I think I was trying to recreate what had happened rather than be ready for something new.
That's really interesting insight.
Such a good point. Yep.
Thanks.
Top marks.
When I think about a moment of joy that repeats itself every time is when we're on the live tour. There's a moment when we get off stage and it's Bridget, Ryan, Josh and myself, and we have like a 4-way hug, and it's like the most joyous experience you can have. And that's every single time. It's just like...
I reckon that, and I think even though the action is repeated, for me it's because I've had to be so present in what we've been doing for the last hour and a half, that even though what we do is similar, there's no choice but to be focused and present in what's happening. So it is unique each time, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think like when you were talking, Josh, the thing that was striking me was about our capacity to habituate. We habituate to experiences. The first time we do something, it's novel and we bring more curiosity. So like there's an unexpected part of your experience which really pulls your attention. So we get more novelty, curiosity, attention, and it feels a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
So then when you do it again, expecting the same outcome, we're already like we're bringing like expectations already in there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the expectations also pull you out of the presentness too.
Yeah.
I would
Yes.
guess. Yeah.
But I think there's an important point to notice in there, and that is that, or the question is, when I experience joy, what is that particular experience highlighting to me about what I value? So it gives us a clue as to what is truly important to me. In those moments, it's going to be highlighting what is valuable in this life. And it's going to be different for different people, right? So we might have the broad points of connection, yes. But it might be different moments like, I'm going to really sound quite nerdy here, but there is a particular running track that I go on that's not near my house, and there's a hill, And when I go down the hill, it looks out to the ocean. It's very beautiful. And I notice for myself, I get such enormous like feelings of joyfulness of being alive that I do a leap and like and I always check to see if anyone's looking.
And like click the one where you click your heels together, that one, or
No, it's more like a leaping forward, like a
oh my gosh.
yeah. And I've never told anyone that
Like a
before. I don't
galloping
even think
deer.
my husband knows that. But it's like a genuine, like a leaping, like
Yeah.
like in this moment for me, this is my ideal fit
Yeah.
with the world.
Yeah.
Now, like even talking about it brings me like a feeling of warmth and all those sorts of things. But that's not going to be the same for everyone, right? So that someone else could be running down the hill thinking this is bloody shit.
Hurts my
Yeah.
knees.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
different experiences, but it points to me about what is of value and valuable for me.
And how do you, to layer that on what I was just saying
Mm.
before, how do you experience repeated joy if it's the same activity and
Yeah.
spot every time?
Yeah. I think definitely it requires you to be paying attention.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the running example, I could be like way too tuned into what I'm listening to, for example,
Yeah.
and I've run past the spot and I was like, oh, that's gone now.
Yeah.
So definitely being like a deliberate, focused attention, but also even if it doesn't feel exactly as intensely wonderful, it's still an action that's promoting like even smaller doses of it.
Mm.
So I'm gathering from what you said that the second time you did it with Charlie, it's not that it felt bad.
No. It
Yeah.
was just that it didn't feel, I found myself a bit distracted, I think,
Mhm.
was what it felt like at the time. And
Yeah.
then because I was a bit distracted, I put pressure on myself to make it as joyful.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
then I was like trying to hyper focus
Yeah.
to recreate it. And it was like trying to, I don't know, for some reason, the analogy that popped in my head, like trying to grab a wet bar of soap.
Mm.
And like the harder I squeeze, the more it kind of flies away.
Back on the live show, like us doing the live show, I know that it happens all the time now that I think about it, because there might be a part of the show that we're doing which is, it's supposed to be a funny part of the show that we might, it's a scripted thing we do every show and it's supposed to be funny. And some shows it gets a bigger laugh than others. So like maybe the first time we did it, the first time it got a really, really big laugh, and I was like, I felt this real like hit of joy of like, oh, it worked. Like they found it funny. And then I'll be doing it the next night or a few nights later, and it doesn't get the same laugh. Maybe people do laugh, but then I get in my head and I'm like, well, why didn't it work? We did exactly the same. And then I'm trying to like grab the soap. Then I'm like desperately trying to like make it funny.
Yeah.
And I just find myself just doing ridiculous things, and I'm forcing it. I'm like forcing it, and it's like I'm losing sight of what we're actually supposed to be doing because I'm chasing the moment that I had a few nights earlier.
Yes. And if we would unpack that, it's like that's actually the mind's actually hooked you and pulled you into a different place. It's actually no longer present.
Not present anymore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I want to emphasize this is so normal. Like there's nothing wrong with that happening. And again, the experience is still like in some ways on track with that value direction for you too. But it's okay that it doesn't feel as good as it did like the first time, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is one other kind of aspect to joyfulness that I really wanted to mention, and I feel like it's going to have a lot of relevance for probably most of Melbourne and Sydney, and probably everywhere else as well. And that is what's the notion of collective effervescence. Have you guys heard of this before?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Is this a Schweppes thing?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's an interesting play on words that the Schweppes people actually came up with. But so collective effervescence was a concept coined by a 19th century sociologist, Emile Durkheim. And it's to refer to the collective experience of joyfulness at like a communal event. Now, the reason I mention Melbourne and Sydney is that I dare say that every single person that went to the Taylor Swift concert can identify with this feeling, that there is a collectiveness, like a contagion that is so much felt in the body and in the mind that this is like it's an uplifting experience.
Yeah.
And I would have to think, like I didn't go, but would have to think that for most people that were there, it was an extremely joyful moment.
Yeah, it's what so many people I heard, because I didn't go either, and I heard some people who went, I heard saying it was joyful. That was like one of the main descriptive words. Yeah.
And now we can see this in lots of different contexts, like going to watch your team play sport. We don't actually know the people, but there is a sense of unity and like that we're all here with this common purpose.
The times where I've been at the football, I'm a Melbourne supporter, so in Melbourne have won a big game, and I'm surrounded by like my dad and people I know and Melbourne supporters and everyone. Like, it is one of the great feelings. It is so true.
Yeah. And so, like, yes, we can't go to a Taylor Swift concert every day of the week or anything, but I think
we have no money left ever.
Exactly. But I think that those moments, even though they're not here anymore, they still live in us, and they're still. And I will come to like why this is important, but they are resources. So even when you think back to that moment, they resource you with like an energy. And they're prompting you to be cooperative, be cohesive, to build things with other people. Like, it's a very motivational feeling.
I've never heard the phrase collective effervescence. It's a great one, and it sounds like something I've thought for a long time. And this is a complex area that we probably don't need to go into too much. But the breakdown of traditional media into sort of a fragmented world where you have like Netflix and all this stuff, and the trade-off with convenience that we get to like view a TV show whenever we want to by ourselves and stuff, as opposed to much less variety, much less stuff going on, but an old world where you had like 4 channels and a newspaper, and something hilarious happened on Hey It's Saturday night, and then everyone at school on Monday talks about that thing that had happened. I feel like in that fragmentation, we've lost so many collective moments of joy and experience.
Absolutely.
And it makes me sad that people don't get to, they experience, it's one of the nice things about streaming services that still delay the release of a show to a weekly schedule, that people get to experience this together and talk about it.
I wouldn't count out Hey coming back, so there's still a chance.
Or you can just go to their streaming service.
That's great. It's such a beautiful point. I often, when Penny and I are choosing what to watch on television, Penny will often say, no, I want connection tonight. And so we'll watch something that we feel like other people might be watching. So like if the footy's on, if it's a team, neither is really barrack for either team. We don't really care. She'll say, just have that in the background. I want to feel connected to other people because I know other people.
Wow.
That's great.
So we'll watch, I don't know, like no offense to Freo and I don't know, Brisbane, 2 teams we don't support. She'll choose to watch that over Succession, where we're so invested in it because we're just like, other people are watching this right now. We'd like to feel connected to them.
And it fits in so well to what you were saying before about joy and that quote that I'm going to butcher, but about it making you feel like everything's right in the world and your place in the world, because I feel like that collective effervescence is such 100%. A tangible feeling of where I belong.
Yes.
I love that example, that feeling connected through watching the footy particularly. It's so true. There's something about live sport.
Well, the Olympics is a good example.
The Olympics.
Yeah.
It does feel like you're connected to other people through what you're watching.
It's funny that the show that you guys created, Hamish and Andy True Story, the one that you came up with, so when that was really at its prime, I was going out to schools doing talks every single day. And the day after, that's what kids were talking about. That's all the kids were talking about, True Story. And it reminded me of what it was like to be at school. We were back at school, which is like on Monday mornings, everyone's talking about the Comedy Company.
Oh, yeah.
Or Round the Twist. Everyone's talking about Round the Twist, what happened on Round the Twist. And this is before we knew each other, I think, but I was loving that you guys had created, like you guys are what kids were talking about at school. And it was so great.
Yeah,
but that's
amazing.
But that's that lovely feeling of like, watching it, knowing you to talk about it the next day.
You feel less lonely as well.
Yeah, it's so true. Even when The Simpsons, when we were back at school, it was like you had to watch it because everyone's going to be talking about whatever
Who shot
episode
Mr. Burns?
Yeah, everyone was talking about it at school, so you had to know. And you would all tune in knowing your friends are watching it. And
probably was, and sorry to just bang on about this, but it's such a powerful thing to me. And I remember back to lockdowns in Melbourne and how the AFL Like they kept playing, and there was a lot of things. Oh, this is ridiculous. Why? But actually, when you think about it, of course, there's a lot of things that were important at that time, and not everyone's things don't make everyone happy. But the importance of the footy continuing meant, and I remember being in lockdown watching the football and thinking, oh, we're all watching this.
Yes.
It was quite powerful.
Collective effervescence. Beautiful.
That's actually interesting that you mentioned lockdown too, because there's some fascinating papers that have come out that were observing what would happen for people in lockdown that were in Italy and the balcony singers. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
And they were interviewing the people that were part of that village or community. And they were just talking about these moments here of like when everything else is so literally locked down, like everything is almost like shut down. And then we get exposed to this moment here where you've got one person on a balcony singing and then everyone else is singing. And like they describe those moments as an exposure obviously to this collective joyfulness, but also what it prompted then was it was a hopefulness that I can be okay. Like that these moments here are resourcing with me, the knowledge that I can cope and it will be okay. And I just thought they were so powerful. Like there are these moments here that we just need to pay attention to, and know that the more we're paying attention to them, the more buffering that is for our general kind of well-being, I think. Yeah.
Feeling a very strong urge to just like finish this conversation on micro moments of positive resonance, because I used to finish all my talks talking about, I don't know why I stopped, but maybe it's because I've just done it so much, but it's such a beautiful concept or phenomenon or whatever you want to call it. And Barbara Fredrickson talks about it heaps, but a micro moment of positive resonance when something happens around you, whether it's seeing a sunset or a smile from a stranger or something that makes you laugh or your first sip of your coffee, whatever it is that just resonates with you so strongly that you feel the emotion of joy. I would just encourage people to just for the next, having listened to this, just pay attention to them over the next few days because we're surrounded by them and we miss them all the time. A lot of the time because we're on our phone or we're stressed about whatever meeting's coming up or what's happening with the kids, but try and pay attention to your micro moments of positive resonance.
Absolutely. And I might even go one step further than that and I might do a little activity with you guys now if that's okay.
Right. So I wound you up a bit early then. Sorry.
No, but it ties in so beautifully. And I will mention just as a quick side thing, music is the fastest way you can elicit joy.
Yep.
So even as like a strategy that you have in your back pocket, like create a playlist of songs that are really uplifting. And so they tend to be the ones that are typically faster in rhythm. So playlist with music, like absolutely amazing entryway into this feeling if we're paying attention.
I'm sure there is, but do you know if there is a ideal, like what's the most joyful beats per minute?
I had it written down actually.
I just wonder if it's 120.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's really interesting because the like Logic Pro, all the like Apple, what's it called, GarageBand, all those, I know the Apple ones, I'm not sure about others. When you start a new project, it's always 120 beats per minute is the default that they've set.
Right.
Wonder if that was.
And it's interesting because like if we look at what makes the like a beat that makes us feel calm, it is usually like within a regular resting heart rate, which would be 60 to 80 beats per minute, because in utero, that is your rhythm of regulation, is listening to the heartbeat of your mother or the person that's carrying you. And so we are actually we have an inbuilt system to be regulated by rhythm. And when we come out, that's how we soothe babies, is to rock them, and we rock them at a certain speed. So that's what induces like regulation and calmness. But joyfulness is actually not necessarily calm. Joyfulness is faster. So it would make sense that therefore that it's not 60 to 80 beats per minute.
Yeah.
It's actually higher than that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry to derail there for a moment. But if we come back to this, okay, so let's pay attention to these moments. Let's take it one step further. And if you're driving listening to this, like either pull over or skip this part. Because I'm going
pause it and do it later.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Or if you're doing anything that requires your vision, then please don't do this. So I might invite you, if you wanted to, guys, to close your eyes.
I just think of a pilot going, is that me? I'm not technically.
And I'm just going to invite you just to bring to mind a joyful moment that you may have had recently, or it may be a long time ago, and it can be very small. And I just want you to really kind of bring to life this memory. So seeing if you can notice the full senses in this experience. So what are the eyes noticing in this memory? Bringing awareness to the sounds that you can hear in this memory. Noticing the temperature of the air on the skin. Noticing what you're smelling. If there's a particular taste that's present, noticing that. And so now I'm going to use the breath to breathe into this memory, almost as though you're expanding the memory into the body. Breathing in, making it bigger. This kind of experience here of savouring this felt sense of joyfulness. You might even like to bring like a gentle smile to the face, just kind of noticing how this is feeling. So breathing in, almost like you're marinating in this particular memory. And now asking yourself, what values does this memory highlight for me? And then whenever you're ready, opening the eyes and coming back to the room.
Wowee. That was good.
I'm curious, what was good about it? What did you notice?
Well, I was thinking of a moment last night. So Jam, my partner Jam, who will be editing this episode. So hello. She was having like a tough day yesterday, and then when I got home, we were just like lying in bed and we started watching an episode of Drive to Survive, which is a Netflix Formula One show, and she just wasn't just not in a good mood all day and really struggling to just be happy really or feel any joy. And we watched it. There's this really, really funny scene, and she was just laughing a lot, and I was laughing a lot, and it was probably the first time I'd heard her laugh in a couple of days, and it just made me realize how much I love it. I feel so much joy when I hear her laughing. Like the sound of her laugh is just so joyous to me. And I think particularly because if it's during a tough time, it's like it's a release for her and then also for me. Yeah, it's really nice.
Wow.
Beautiful.
It's incredible.
Wow.
Obviously, Jam, edit that bit out, but
well, it was the same thing I was thinking about before.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
not Jam laughing.
Jam, yeah, mine's the same. Nothing brings me joy like Jam laughing. It is lovely. Jam's got a great laugh. No, it was the same story as before, the basketball thing.
So Patrick, our 20-month-old, has been watching Benji's obsession with cricket develop, and so he copies everything his older brother does. And I often bat in the hallway, and Benji just bowls to me for hours. And every ball he says, "Who's this?" And I have to say who the bowler is. And Benji was at school the other day, and Patrick picked up the ball and was just off the longest run. He would run so far, and then he'd throw it at me from about half a foot away and throw it into my leg. And he does this, I was left arm, and he does it with his left arm. He's like every single ball. And he doesn't know what Benji says after, so Benji appeals a lot. And so he would, every single ball, he'd throw the ball into my leg and go, "Ay," because that's all he can say is "ay." And it was just, we did it for like 15 minutes, and it was just, yeah, it was incredible. And it was, I think the value for me was like connection to my family, like feeling close to my family. And that joy was just immense.
That's awesome. So I guess I just want to highlight, as we're finishing, that that these moments still live with us. And, really in an exercise like that, we can access that feeling like in the present moment, even though that feeling has gone, like that experience has gone. So, we can do that with the memories that we've had. And then we also want to do that in the moment, if it's in any way possible, with the joy that we are experiencing right now. So I just really want to emphasize that even in the midst of a lot of struggle, there's always an opportunity to notice the good.
A filing cabinet of joy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dr. M.
I don't want to destroy your perfect roundup then, because I feel like I wanted to add something, but it feels like clumsy because that was beautiful. But what you're saying and what we just did then, the thing that came to mind was Sean Turnell.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say. And then thought maybe I shouldn't because she's finished.
Yeah, because she's finished and I don't want to have a clumsy ending.
Yes.
But in the episode that we did with Sean Turnell about, he had this experience walking home when he was a teenager, I think it was, and it was just like beautiful sunlight. And he's like, I want to remember this forever and have access to this memory.
Yeah.
And he used it throughout his life. I nearly cried when he was telling me there's something so pure and beautiful about it, and how even in what could only be described as the depths of despair that he went through, he was still able to access that.
It's like reverse. It's like doing that activity in reverse. Like as something great happens, think to yourself, I'm putting this in my happy memory filing cabinet.
Yeah.
I want to come back to this.
Yes. And the most powerful thing that he did, from what I remember, he didn't even know why it was that there was that particular moment that he was focusing on. But we have this opportunity, like any time of the day, to pause and go like, this moment I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
You take in all of your senses, you breathe it in and you pause.
It's kind of like on your photo app, it's like favoriting it.
Yes.
It's like favoriting an experience. It's like, favorite this because I want this to pop up later.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. M, so good to see you again.
Oh, it's
Thank
great to
you.
see you.
It was quite joyous. I am favoriting this chat.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.